Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into some really interesting source material. It explores something fundamental, the nature of philosophy itself.
Yeah, and it contrasts different ways we think about the world
Yeah.
and introduces this perspective called pragmatism.
And this isn't about, you know, dusty old textbooks.
Not at all. The source material, it's from lectures by a pretty well-known thinker, and it starts right off saying, everyone, yes, you listening, has a philosophy.
Right. Maybe not a formal system, but what does he call it? Our own.
Dumb sense of what life honestly and deeply means. Our personal way of seeing and feeling the total push and pressure of the cosmos.
I love that phrase. It makes philosophy feel immediate, personal, something we're all doing anyway.
Exactly.
So in this deep dive, our mission is really to unpack the core ideas from these lectures. We're going to look at this clash of philosophical temperaments he talks about.
And explore what this new way of thinking pragmatism actually is, how it kind of flips the script on truth.
And what it means for tackling those really huge questions. Reality, God, design, free will, all that.
And we'll do this by focusing on what the source says truly matters.
Yeah.
The practical consequences, the sort of working value of different beliefs.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's see what unexpected nuggets of insight we can find together that might, resonate with how you see the world.
Let's dive in. So the source material kicks off with this idea that a huge chunk of philosophy's history isn't just pure logic clashing. It's deeply shaped by a clash of human temperaments.
Temperaments, like personality types for philosophers.
Sort of, yeah. Philosophers try to hide it, right? They want to offer these purely impersonal reasons. But the author argues that their basic attitude, their gut feeling about the world, is often the potentest of all our premises.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. Your underlying vibe shapes the system you build. And he gives us this really clear contrast, doesn't he, between two main types.
He does. The tender-minded and the tough-minded.
Okay, so tender-minded, they're the ones leaning towards rationalism. Principles, ideals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Rationalistic, intellectualistic, idealistic, optimistic, religious, free willist, monistic, be like unity, abstract ideas, principles first.
Got it. And the tough-minded are the flip side.
Complete opposite.
Yeah.
Empiricist, facts first. Sensationalistic, materialistic, pessimistic, often irreligious, fatalistic, pluralistic. They gravitate towards concrete reality, the messy details, maybe a more fragmented view.
So facts, grit, maybe a bit more downbeat?
You could say that. And importantly, the author points out, most of us aren't purely one or the other. We're a mix. We kind of want the good things on both sides.
Which leads to this problem, right? What he calls the layman's dilemma. You, thinking about your own philosophy, you want something that feels scientific, that respects the facts. That's your tough-minded side speaking up.
But you also need something that leaves room for meaning, maybe something religious, or at least something that preserves human values, possibility, freedom. That's the tender-minded part.
And the existing options, they seem to force a choice.
That's the dilemma. Traditional philosophies often seem to offer one without the other. Empiricism gives you the facts, which is good, but it can feel cold, materialistic, maybe even inhuman, as the source puts it. It can feel like it reduces everything beautiful or meaningful to just physics.
Yeah, like ideals are just byproducts of physiology. Bleak.
And on the other hand, rationalism offers the ideals, maybe religion, but it can feel detached from, actual life. A bit airy-fairy, sometimes artificial.
Like that example he gives of Leibniz, trying to mathematically justify the number of people damned.
Exactly. The author finds that kind of thing really detached, like a purely intellectual exercise that misses the concrete reality of suffering. It doesn't feel grounded.
So you turn to the experts, the philosophical systems, and they feel lacking, either not religious enough or not empirical enough. Actual things feel sort of blank to the religious philosophy sometimes.
And this is the gap, the tension, where the source says, hey, maybe there's a new way of thinking emerging, something that could mediate.
And that is pragmatism.
That's pragmatism. He introduces it first as a method.
Okay, so not a set of doctrines right away, but a tool, a way to approach problems and settle arguments. How's it work?
The core idea is tracing the respective practical consequences of different ideas or notions.
Practical consequences.
Yeah, it asks this key question. What difference would it practically make to anyone if this notion rather than that notion were true?
So what difference in concrete fact and in conduct consequent upon that fact if an idea doesn't change anything tangible or how we'd act?
Then pragmatically speaking, the alternatives mean practically the same thing. The dispute is just idle, hot air, basically.
That's pretty radical. It could just cut through so much philosophical arguing. He uses that example about chemists, right? Arguing about tautomerous bodies.
Right, a super technical thing. But the point is, if their different theories about the inner structure lead to no difference in how they experiment, what they observe, or what they do next in the lab.
Then the argument doesn't matter, practically.
Exactly. The pragmatic test says, in that context, the dispute collapses. And the source claims this method makes many philosophical disputes collapse into insignificance. It really brings things down to earth.
But it's not just a method, is it? He also calls it a temper of mind, an attitude.
It is. It's a whole orientation. As a temper, it means turning away from certain philosophical habits.
Like what?
Abstraction for abstraction's sake, purely verbal solutions, weak a priori reasons, things claimed true, before experience fixed principles you never question, closed systems pretending you have the final absolute truth.
Okay, turning away from that and turning towards.
Concreteness and adequacy, facts, action, power. Getting things done, seeing how ideas work out.
So that empiricist temper, the love of facts, is definitely strong here.
It's regnant, as he says. But, and this is key, it doesn't mean throwing out everything the tender-minded care about. It's about grounding things in how they function in our lives. It's about embracing the open air and possibilities of nature as against dogma, artificiality, and the pretense of finality and truth.
That really does feel like a breath of fresh air. And okay, this pragmatic approach, this focus on working value, it must fundamentally change how we think about something as basic as truth.
Oh, absolutely. It leads to a whole theory of truth, which the source sometimes calls humanism. And yeah, it's a massive shift from how truth is usually seen in philosophy.
So the old idea is truth is this fixed, static property. An idea is true or false, sitting there like a statue, waiting for us to find it.
Right. Pragmatism says, forget that. Truth happens to an idea. It becomes true, is made true by events. Its truth, its verity, isn't a state, it's a process, the process of it verifying itself.
Whoa. Okay, so what does agreement with reality mean then, pragmatically?
It means verifiability, which in practice means an idea's ability to guide us prosperously through experience, to lead us well, help us navigate, connect fruitfully with the actual particulars of experience. Does it work? Does it pay off?
But we operate on loads of beliefs we haven't personally verified, right?
Right.
Like, I believe my car will start, but I haven't checked the engine this morning. I believe, Antarctica exists, though I've never been.
Exactly. The source points this out. We live by countless unverified truths. It works because of indirect verification. Other people have been to Antarctica. My car usually does start. It works because these beliefs are consistent with our other working beliefs, and crucially, they don't lead to frustration or contradiction in practice.
It's like a credit system.
That's the phrase he uses. The credit relies on the possibility of actual verification somewhere down the line by someone. If the check started bouncing, the system would collapse.
Okay, contrast that with the traditional rationalist view where truth is just there, an inherent quality. Verification is just how we happen to find it.
Right. The source pushes back on that, suggesting it sometimes treats the word truth like it's an independent entity itself. He compares it to concepts like health or wealth or strength. Well, pragmatically, what do those words mean? Their meaning is in their working values, their performances. Someone is healthy because their body functions well. Someone is strong because they can do strong things. We might abstract these into qualities, but their meaning is in the doing.
So truth is similar. Its meaning is in what the idea does for us in navigating reality.
Precisely. The true, pragmatically speaking, is only the expedient in the way of our thinking. Just like he adds, the right is only the expedient in the way of our behaving.
Expedient? That sounds a bit cutthroat, just whatever works.
But he qualifies that. It's expediency in the long run and on the whole. It's not about short-term gain or just believing whatever feels good right now. It's about what works sustainably, coherently, integrating with all our other experiences and beliefs over time.
Okay, that makes more sense. Long-term overall expediency. And this view makes truth sound dynamic, mutable.
Very much so. It's growing, evolving, not ready-made from eternity. Facts influence our beliefs. Our beliefs make us act. Our actions bring new facts or experiences to light, which then feed back and reshape our beliefs. It's a double influence, he says, like a snowball's growth.
And the facts themselves, they aren't true or false.
Facts simply are. They exist. Truth and falsity are properties of our beliefs about those facts, about how well those beliefs help us engage with the facts.
Wow. That's a really active, ongoing picture of how we understand the world. And it seems like even our most basic ways of structuring reality might have developed this way too.
Yes, exactly. The source delves into how our fundamental concepts, the ones we take for granted, likely evolved. It focuses on the stage of common sense.
You mean things like space, time, physical objects, cause and effect, even our sense of self versus body, the absolute basics.
Those very things. Pragmatism doesn't see them as these perfect, innate, God-given categories. Instead, they're presented as discoveries of exceedingly remote ancestors.
Discoveries, like they figured them out.
More like successful hypotheses. He calls them dank middle thinking tools. Ways of organizing the chaos of raw sensation that proved incredibly useful for predicting things, communicating, coordinating action, basically, for surviving and thriving. They stuck around because they worked.
They were magnificently useful, right? For putting a frame around the discontinuity of immediate experiences, making sense of it all.
Precisely. They helped unify perception into a manageable world of things and causes. But then, he contrasts this common sense stage with later, more critical stages.
Like science and philosophy.
Right, science starts positing things we can't see, like atoms or electromagnetic fields, to explain what we can see. And critical philosophy might go even further, questioning whether even those common sense categories are just sublime tricks of human thought, useful fictions, rather than direct insights into reality's true nature.
And even scientific concepts. Things like atoms or energy. The source mentions some thinkers were already seeing those pragmatically, too.
Yeah, people like Mach and Ostwald. They suggested maybe even these scientific concepts aren't literal copies of reality, but more like useful ways of talking, conceptual tools that help us predict and control phenomena, focusing on functional variation rather than trying to pin down ultimate causes.
So the big pragmatic takeaway here is that all our ways of thinking, from common sense up to science, might be understood as incredibly successful hypotheses or tools. They help us grapple with reality effectively, but they aren't necessarily perfect, final blueprints of what reality is in itself.
Exactly. They are judged by their usefulness, their cash value in helping us navigate experience.
Okay, so once you've got this pragmatic method focusing on practical consequences and this pragmatic temper focusing on facts, action, and how things work, you can turn these tools onto those classic, big, often really abstract philosophical problems.
Right. Let's see how it plays out. Let's apply the pragmatic test. First up, substance.
Ah, the old question. What's the underlying stuff of a thing? Like, what is the substance of this table beyond its color, hardness, shape?
Pragmatically, the source says the substance of the table is just that group of attributes you experience. It's color, hardness, shape, texture. That collection is its sole cash value in your experience.
So the idea of some hidden, unknowable substratum underneath.
It makes no practical difference. You can't interact with it. It
Mhm.
doesn't change how you use the table or what you expect from it. It's empty of pragmatic consequences. He mentions Bishop Berkeley's criticism of matter along these lines. Its only meaning is the sensations it gives us.
Okay, substance is just the bundle of observable properties that matter in practice. Got it. What about a really big one? Materialism versus spiritualism or theism?
Mhm.
Is the universe fundamentally matter and energy following physical laws, or is there mind, spirit, God behind it all?
This is where the pragmatic method gets really interesting because it splits the question.
Yeah.
Retrospectively, looking back at the past world,
Yeah.
the source says these views make not a single jot of difference. The facts of history, the scientific laws we've observed, they are what they are. Saying atoms did it or God did it doesn't change the past events themselves.
Which is why, he says, everyday people and scientists often find these debates kind of pointless, verbal, and empty.
Exactly. Because explaining the past differently doesn't alter the past, but prospectively looking towards the future,
Ah, okay.
they paint wholly different outlooks. Materialism, if it sticks to what contemporary science seemed to suggest then, points towards a universe winding down. Heat death, entropy, the eventual dissolution of everything, tragedy for all life and evolution. He quotes Balfour describing this bleak outlook, this disconsolateness.
So believing in materialism has a practical consequence for your hope, your expectation of the ultimate future.
Definitely. Theism or spiritualism, though, if it means there's an eternal moral order or some kind of guiding intelligence or purpose, well, it offers hope. It suggests our ideals, our values might have more permanent place, that they aren't doomed to vanish with the physical cosmos.
So the real objection to materialism, pragmatically, isn't about the composition of matter itself, but about the feeling it leaves you with, its practical effect on our need for meaning and hope.
That's exactly it. It's the disconsolateness, the practical result for our felt need of an eternal moral order. That need, if you feel it, makes the debate genuine enough. It's not just abstract. It affects our orientation towards life and the future.
That completely reframes it. It's not just about cosmology, but about livability. Okay, what about the design argument?
Hmm.
You know, the idea that nature looks designed, the eye fits seeing, the bird fits flying, so there must be a designer.
Yeah, the classic watchmaker argument, sort of. The source acknowledges the standard challenges. Darwinism, providing an alternative mechanism, the sheer amount of waste and apparent cruelty in nature, things that look designed for predation or suffering, depending on your point of view.
Right, the woodpecker and the grub again.
Exactly. Pragmatically, the source argues the bare abstract word design is like a blank cartridge. It doesn't do anything on its own. Just saying there is design has no consequences. It doesn't tell you what to expect or how to act.
The real question is,
What sort of design? Is it benevolent, malevolent, competent, clumsy? Answering that requires looking at the actual facts of the world, not just invoking the word design.
okay, so design itself is empty, but what if you fill that word with meaning through faith? What if design implies a specific theistic designer, like God?
Then it gains pragmatic value. It might not predict specific scientific facts better, but it offers, as the source puts it, a vague confidence in the future, an expectation of better issues overall, because there's a seeing, intentional force at work rather than just blind, indifferent forces. That feeling of hope, that trust in the ultimate outcome, that's the pragmatic consequence, the cash value of believing in that kind of design.
Interesting. It's about the future outlook again. Okay, last big one. Free will versus determinism. Are our choices genuinely open, or is everything predetermined?
Another classic philosophical headache.
Huh.
The source notes how often this debate gets bogged down in questions of accountability or imputability. Can you hold someone responsible if their actions were inevitable? Or can you hold them responsible if they were just random? He finds this whole line of argument a bit of a piteous unreality, pragmatically speaking. Who are we to judge ultimate moral responsibility anyway?
So if we sidestep that, what's the core pragmatic issue between free will and determinism?
Again, it's forward-looking. Free will, pragmatically understood, means novelties in the world. It means genuine possibility, the potential for things to be different. It means, crucially, the right to hope. It makes the idea of improvement as at least possible.
And determinism.
Determinism suggests that possibility is just an illusion born of our ignorance. Everything is necessary. The future is already fixed, even if we can't see it. Hope for genuine change becomes, well, sort of unfounded.
So believing in free will gives you a practical orientation of hope and striving. It fuels action towards improvement.
Exactly. Believing the future is open makes it rational to try and shape it. These big concepts, God, design, free will, they gain their pragmatic traction, their real bite, because, as the source says, our ordinary empirical future feels to us unsafe and needs some higher guarantee. Their meaning isn't exhausted by explaining the past. It lies largely in the promise or the outlook they offer for our future experience and action.
Okay, so pragmatism seems less about finding some single absolute capital T truth and more about understanding how different ideas function as tools or guides for navigating life, especially towards the future. And this must also shape how pragmatism views reality itself. Is it fundamentally one unified thing, or is it many?
That's a great point. Philosophy often has this deep drive towards unity, right? Finding the one behind the many. What the source reminds us, the intellect also loves variety. We're curious about details, specifics. We want totality, which means both acquaintance with all the parts and understanding how they connect.
We want both the forest and the trees.
Nicely put. So the source looks at different ways the world might be called one, but always through that pragmatic lens.
But how?
Well, you can say it's one, just because we can talk about it all as the world, one subject of discourse. Or it's one system connected by space, time, and cause and effect, or one in that things fall into kinds. Or maybe unified by purpose or origin, or even by the idea of a single absolute one knower who grasps everything at once.
But the pragmatic angle is...
Each of these unities exists only just so far as they obtain in our actual experience. Where the connections fail, where things seem separate or unrelated, the world, from that perspective, is not one, Manifoldness, diversity, plurality, it's seen as absolutely coordinate with oneness. It's just as real.
So it's not trying to force unity where we don't actually find it.
Yeah, exactly. This leads towards what's called pluralism, the hypothesis that the world might be imperfectly unified still, maybe even eternally incomplete. Its parts might be only loosely connected, like an additive constitution.
Additive, like you can add things to it.
Yep. Yeah, think less of a perfect closed sphere and more like,
Yeah.
well, your analogy was good. A city. Buildings get added, roads change, connections form and dissolve. It's a structure, but it's maybe always under construction, always growing, with parts that are connected in some ways but quite separate in others.
Whereas the traditional monistic view, especially in rationalism, often pushes for that ultimate unity, like the one knower, the absolute mind, seeing everything as one single, timeless, perfect fact.
Right. And that view often seems driven by a temperament that really desires that sense of completion, fixity, a reality that's already perfectly sorted out behind the messy appearances.
But pragmatism, being more grounded in experience, leans the other way.
It must obviously range herself upon the pluralistic side, respecting that felt additive constitution of experience where things often seem partly joined and partly disjoined. It takes the messiness and multiplicity seriously.
But true to its method, it wouldn't necessarily reject the idea of an absolute knower out of hand, would it?
Not if that idea works for someone. If believing in an absolute provides genuine religious comfort, if it has positive practical consequences for how someone lives their life, then pragmatism respects that function.
Which brings us right back to pragmatism in religion. How does it handle religious belief?
As that potential mediator, remember, it's open to hypotheses like God if they prove to have consequences useful to life. These big universal concepts can take up pragmatic values as guides for our future experience, as ways to live.
He uses that Walt Whitman poem, To You, as an example, doesn't he? With two ways to read it.
Right. One way is sort of monistic, mystical. You see this absolute inner core of safety and value in everyone, regardless of how messy things look on the surface. It leads towards a kind of acceptance, maybe quietism. And the source respects this. It says this view has a massive historic vindication. It has genuinely worked for countless people.
Okay, that's one reading. The other.
The other reading, which aligns more with the active, pluralistic, pragmatic temper, interprets that glorified you, not as some hidden absolute essence, but as representing concrete, better possibilities within people, redemptive potential, loyalty to what others could become. This reading points towards definite future experience and, crucially, definite activities. It calls for engagement, for work.
Less mystical, maybe more action-oriented.
Exactly. And the value of concepts like the absolute, or God, for many people, lies precisely in the religious comfort they offer, the feeling that, despite appearances, the ultimate outcome can be trusted, that the temporal struggle has some kind of internal significance. Pragmatism says, okay, if that belief performs that function, it's true in so far forth, it works in that specific vital way.
And this ties into the pragmatic meaning of possible, right?
Yes, possible doesn't just mean not impossible, the mere absence of obstacles. More importantly, pragmatically, it means the presence of some of the actual conditions needed for something to come about, a concretely grounded possibility.
Like his example. Saying a chicken is possible means more than just no law forbids chickens. It implies an actual egg exists somewhere.
Exactly. So applying this to something huge like the salvation of the world, saying it's possible pragmatically, means some of the conditions do actually exist. What conditions? Well, our ideals exist, our hopes exist, and most importantly perhaps, our ACT. Our actions are part of the conditions.
Wow. So he poses this really bold question. Could our actions actually create that salvation bit by bit? Could we be making the future, catching fact in the making at these turning places and growing places?
It's a radical thought. It goes against the grain of thinking the universe is a finished product. A rationalist might object, that's irrational. New reality can't just pop up in patches.
But the pragmatic response?
The source suggests maybe the only real reason anything new comes to be is because it's needed, it's wished, it's demanded. A living reason, driven by desire and action, not just logical necessity.
This leads to a picture of the world that's unfinished, uncertain.
Yes, a world not certain to be saved. A real adventure with real danger. Maybe even a social scheme of cooperative work, where the outcome isn't guaranteed in advance.
And a true pragmatist, then, has to be okay with that uncertainty.
That's the conclusion. Willing to embrace this drastic kind of a universe with seriousness. Willing to live based on uncertified possibilities they choose to trust. willing to invest themselves, to pay with their person for ideals, knowing there might be real losses and real losers. Believing in the ideal as an ultimate goal to strive for, not as a pre-existing absolute reality.
It demands a certain kind of courage, doesn't it?
It does, and again, the hypothesis of God, for those for whom it genuinely works satisfactorily in navigating this uncertain world and providing hope or strength, is accepted by pragmatism as true in that functional sense. The ongoing task then becomes how to define that belief more clearly and integrate it with all the other truths that also work in our experience.
It's a philosophy that really seems to put the future and our role in shaping it right at the center.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Action, consequence, possibility, those are key.
So, wow. Okay, we've taken quite the deep dive into these ideas about pragmatism. We've seen as, first, a method focused on practical consequences.
Right, the cash value of idea,
Then as a temper, an attitude that embraces facts, action, possibility.
turning towards the concrete.
A view of truth itself as this dynamic process, something that happens to ideas when they work.
Made true by events, yeah.
An interpretation of even our basic concepts like common sense as powerful, successful hypotheses that evolved because they were useful.
Tools for thinking, basically.
And finally, a way of tackling those huge philosophical questions, reality, God, free will, by looking at their forward-looking implications, the promise they hold for our future actions and experience.
It really does offer a compelling way to navigate that perennial tension, doesn't it? Between the tough-minded insistence on facts and the tender-minded need for meaning, value, hope. It judges ideas by how they function, by their working value in our lives.
And it leaves us with this really striking picture, I think. A world that might not be finished. A world that's genuinely incomplete, maybe like a real adventure unfolding, where our choices, our actions, aren't just playing out a pre-written script.
But could be real contributions, actually adding to the fabric of what the world is becoming.
Yeah, it shifts the focus, like you said, from just contemplating reality to actively participating in its creation.
That's a powerful shift.
So here's maybe a thought for you listening to carry forward from this deep dive. How does applying this pragmatic lens change the way you look at the ideas and beliefs you hold most deeply?
Yeah, what are the actual practical consequences, the cash value of your own core convictions? How do they shape how you live, how you act, how you face the future?
Thinking about your beliefs not just as things you hold true, but as tools you use to navigate, how well do they actually work?
That's the pragmatic challenge.
Until next time, keep asking what difference it makes.